The deafening crack of gunfire shattered the dawn stillness as Hannah Benson ducked behind the weathered barrel outside her father's general store, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. It wasn't the first time Clearwater, Wyoming had seen trouble, but this time was different this time. It was Mitchell Wyatt who'd returned, and Hannah knew her long wait was finally coming to an end. Wyoming Territory, 1876. Hannah, for heaven's sake, get inside. Her father shouted from the doorway of Benson's general store, his face a mask of worry. These outlaws won't think twice about shooting a woman. The dusty main street of Clearwater had erupted into chaos moments before when 3 riders had thundered into town, guns blazing. Most townsfolk had scattered, but Hannah remained frozen, her eyes fixed on the lead rider, a tall figure whose familiar silhouette made her breath catch despite the danger. "That's Mitchell," Hannah whispered, more to herself than her father. "All the more reason to get inside," her father growled, reaching for her arm. "That man brings nothing but trouble." Hannah allowed herself to be pulled through the doorway, but her eyes never left the scene unfolding in the street. Mitchell Wyatt, once Clearwater's most promising young rancher, was now trading gunfire with Sheriff Davis and his deputies. 3 years he's been gone, her father muttered, securing the door. "Shows up now leading a gang. I told you he was no good, Hannah. Everyone did." Hannah said nothing, remembering the promise Mitchell had made to her on that warm summer evening before everything fell apart. "Wait for me," he'd whispered against her ear. "No matter what you hear, no matter what they say, I'll come back for you." The town had been scandalized when Mitchell fled after being accused of stealing cattle from the powerful Holbrook Ranch. Some said he'd killed a man, too. Hannah never believed it, and she defended him fiercely until people stopped discussing it around her altogether. "You're a fool, Hannah Benson," her best friend Lucille had told her just last week. "Waiting for a man who's probably dead or married to some saloon girl in Mexico by now." The gunfire outside subsided, and Hannah peered through the small window to see Mitchell and his companions racing out of town, a posse forming to give chase. "He's alive," she whispered, hope and fear mingling in her chest. "He came back. To rob the bank," her father corrected harshly. "Not for you, daughter. It's time you faced the truth and started considering Thomas Miller's proposal. He's a good man with a steady job at the bank." Hannah shook her head stubbornly. "I gave my word, father, to a fugitive," her father exploded. "A man who's brought nothing but shame to his family name and now leads a gang of thieves. Your mother would be heartbroken to see you throwing your life away like this." Hannah turned away, blinking back tears. Her mother had died 2 years ago, never knowing if Hannah's faith in Mitchell would be vindicated. Some days, Hannah herself wondered if she was indeed the fool everyone claimed her to be. That night, as Hannah was closing up the store alone, the back door creaked open. She whirled around, clutching a broom like a weapon, only to find herself face to face with Mitchell Wyatt. Time had changed him. The boyish handsomeness had hardened into something more dangerous. A scar ran along his jaw, and his blue eyes held shadows they hadn't before. But when he smiled, Hannah saw the man she'd been waiting for. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice trembling despite her resolve to stay calm. "Sheriff Davis has the whole town looking for you." "I had to see you," Mitchell said, removing his hat. His dark hair was longer now, curling at the nape of his neck. "I saw you today by the barrels, still as beautiful as the day I left." "The day you fled," Hannah corrected, keeping her distance despite the longing to throw herself into his arms. "They say you're an outlaw now." Mitchell's jaw tightened. "Things aren't what they seem, Hannah." "Then explain them to me," she challenged. 3 years with no word, Mitchell. 3 years of defending you to everyone in this town, and you return shooting up the street like some common bandit." "I couldn't write," he said, taking a step closer. "It wasn't safe for either of us." Hannah held her ground. "Safe from what? The truth." "From Holbrook and his men," Mitchell said, his voice dropping. "I didn't steal those cattle, Hannah. I was framed because I discovered something I wasn't meant to know." Hannah wanted desperately to believe him. What did you discover? Holbrook's been running more than cattle on his land, Mitchell said, glancing toward the window cautiously. He's been working with corrupt officials, smuggling goods across the border. When I found out, he made sure I'd take the blame for his missing cattle. Why come back now? Hannah asked, and with guns blazing, Mitchell's expression softened. For you, I always meant to come back for you. As an outlaw, Hannah felt tears welling in her eyes. What kind of life could we have? I'm gathering evidence, Mitchell explained. My friends aren't outlaws, they're former rangers. We're building a case against Holbrook, but we needed documents from the bank. Hannah stepped back, doubt clouding her features. So you didn't rob the bank? We took papers, not money, Mitchell insisted. Records of Holbrook's transactions. With these, we can prove what he's been doing and clear my name. Hannah searched his face, wanting desperately to trust him. The whole town thinks you're a criminal. What do you think, Hannah? Mitchell asked softly. After all this time, do you still believe in me? Before Hannah could answer, shouts from the street interrupted them. The posse was returning to town. I have to go, Mitchell said urgently, reaching for her hand. But I'll be back. This will all be over soon, I promise. More promises, Hannah whispered, but she didn't pull her hand away. Mitchell pressed something into her palm before releasing her. Keep this safe. If anything happens to me, take it to Judge Wilson in Cheyenne. He'll know what to do. Hannah looked down at a folded document sealed with wax. Mitchell, do you still wait for me? He asked, his voice vulnerable beneath the hardened exterior. Despite everything, Hannah nodded. I'm still waiting. A genuine smile transformed his face. Then I'll move heaven and earth to come back to you. With that, he slipped into the night, leaving Hannah clutching the document and wondering if she truly was the fool everyone claimed. The following days passed in tense anticipation. Sheriff Davis and his men continued searching the surrounding countryside for Mitchell and his companions, while Hannah carried the sealed document with her everywhere, hidden in a pocket sewn into her skirt. You look pale, dear, Mrs. Peterson remarked as Hannah measured fabric in the store. Are you feeling unwell? Just tired, Hannah replied with a forced smile. It's no wonder with all this excitement, the older woman clucked. First those bandits, and now I hear Thomas Miller is planning to propose to you formally at the Founders' Day celebration next week. Hannah nearly dropped her scissors. I beg your pardon. Oh, Mrs. Peterson covered her mouth. Was it meant to be a surprise? Your father seemed quite pleased about it when he mentioned it to my husband. Hannah's cheeks burned with anger. Her father had no right to encourage Thomas's suit when he knew her feelings on the matter. Nothing is settled, Hannah said firmly, and I would appreciate if people wouldn't discuss my personal affairs. Mrs. Peterson raised her eyebrows. Well, I certainly didn't mean to offend. But Hannah, dear, you must think of your future. You're 22 now, not getting any younger. Thank you for your concern, Hannah replied stiffly, wrapping the woman's purchase with more force than necessary. That evening, Hannah confronted her father in their small home behind the store. You had no right to tell people Thomas Miller is going to propose, she said, setting down her dinner plate with a clatter. Her father sighed deeply. Hannah, be reasonable. Thomas is a fine man with prospects. I don't love him, Hannah insisted. Love, her father scoffed. You think your mother and I were head over heels when we married. That comes later with time and shared life. It wasn't that way for you and Mother, Hannah argued. I remember how you looked at each other. Her father's expression softened momentarily. That was after years together, child. And we were practical people who built something lasting. This fantasy you have about Mitchell Wyatt, it's not a fantasy, Hannah interrupted. He came to see me, Father, the night after the shooting. Her father's face paled. He was here in our store. He's innocent, Hannah insisted. He was framed by Holbrook. Her father laughed without humor. And you believe him. After 3 years, he rides into town shooting, then spins you some tale about being framed. Yes, Hannah said simply. I believe him. Her father studied her face before shaking his head sadly. Then you are indeed the fool everyone says you are. The words stung more coming from him than anyone else. Hannah pushed back from the table, blinking back tears. Perhaps I am, but I'd rather be a fool who believes in someone than wise and alone. 2 days later, Hannah was arranging a new shipment of canned goods when Thomas Miller entered the store. Handsome in a conventional way with his neatly trimmed mustache and banker's suit, Thomas had been courting Hannah with her father's enthusiastic approval for months, despite her clear lack of interest. "Good afternoon, Hannah," he greeted, removing his hat. "You look lovely today." "Thank you, Thomas," Hannah replied politely. "What can I help you with?" "Actually, I was hoping we might take a walk this evening," Thomas said, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "There's something important I wish to discuss with you." Hannah's heart sank. "Thomas, I don't think, please," he interrupted. "Just a short walk. I know your feelings about certain matters, but I ask only for a chance to speak my piece." Guilt tugged at Hannah. Thomas had always been kind, even if his attention was unwanted. "Very well, I close the store at 6. Thomas beamed. "Excellent, I'll return then." After he left, Hannah continued stocking shelves mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She wondered where Mitchell was, if he was safe, if his claims about clearing his name would prove true. At precisely 6 o'clock, Thomas returned as promised. Hannah reluctantly accompanied him on a walk toward the church at the edge of town, maintaining a proper distance between them. "Hannah," Thomas began after several minutes of small talk, "I've made no secret of my admiration for you." "You've been very kind," Hannah acknowledged, already dreading where the conversation was heading. "I believe I could make you happy," Thomas continued earnestly. "I have a good position at the bank, savings for a comfortable home. We could have a good life together." Hannah stopped walking. "Thomas, before you answer," he rushed on, "there's something else. I've been offered a position at the Denver bank deputy manager. It would mean relocating, but it's a significant opportunity." Hannah blinked in surprise. "That's wonderful, Thomas. Congratulations." "I want you to come with me," he said, taking her hand. "As my wife." Despite anticipating this moment, Hannah found herself at a loss for words. A life in Denver, away from Clearwater, away from the whispers and pitying glances, there was a certain appeal to it. But it would also mean giving up on Mitchell, on the promise she'd kept for 3 long years. "You deserve someone who loves you completely," Hannah said gently, withdrawing her hand. "I can't be that person." Thomas's expression hardened slightly. "Because of Wyatt, Hannah, the man is a criminal. He'll hang when they catch him." "You don't know him," Hannah defended. "Neither do you anymore," Thomas countered. "People change. The boy you knew is gone." Hannah shook her head. "I'm sorry, Thomas. My answer is no." Thomas studied her face, disappointment evident in his eyes. "You're making a mistake, Hannah. One day you'll realize how much time you've wasted waiting for a ghost." As they walked back toward town in uncomfortable silence, Hannah noticed unusual activity near the sheriff's office. A crowd had gathered, and excited voices carried on the evening air. "What's happening?" she asked a young boy racing past. "They caught one of them outlaws," he called back over his shoulder. "The tall one." Hannah's heart plummeted. She quickened her pace, leaving Thomas behind as she pushed through the gathering crowd. Sheriff Davis and 2 deputies were escorting a manacled prisoner from a wagon. Mitchell, his face bloodied and clothes torn. "Mitchell?" Hannah cried without thinking. His head jerked up at her voice, his eyes finding hers in the crowd. Sheriff Davis shoved him roughly toward the jailhouse door. "Keep moving, Wyatt," the sheriff growled. "Your hanging day will come soon enough." "He deserves a trial," Hannah shouted, drawing stares from those around her. Sheriff Davis paused, looking back at her with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "He'll get one, Miss Benson. Though with the evidence we have, it'll be brief." Hannah pushed forward. "What evidence?" Hannah, Thomas caught up, gripping her arm. "This isn't proper." "Let go of me," she hissed, pulling free. Mitchell was watching her, a silent message in his eyes that Hannah couldn't decipher. As the deputies pushed him through the jailhouse door, he stumbled deliberately, buying himself a moment to mouth something to her. Judge Wilson. The document. She needed to get it to Judge Wilson in Cheyenne, just as Mitchell had instructed. But how could she possibly make such a journey alone? Cheyenne was over 100 miles away. That night, Hannah paced her bedroom, the sealed document in her hands. Her father had gone to bed after another argument about her foolish devotion to a criminal, making it clear he expected her to put Mitchell Wyatt from her mind once and for all. Instead, Hannah was making plans. The stagecoach to Laramie would leave at dawn, and from there she could catch another to Cheyenne. She had savings, not much, but enough for the journey. The real question was whether she could truly leave her father, and the only home she'd ever known, on the slim chance that Mitchell's claims were true. By morning, her decision was made. She left a brief note for her father, packed a small bag, and slipped out before sunrise, the precious document secured inside her bodice. The journey to Cheyenne took nearly 3 days, with an overnight stay in Laramie that depleted much of Hannah's modest savings. By the time the stagecoach rolled into Wyoming's capital city, she was exhausted, dusty, and increasingly doubtful about her impulsive mission. Cheyenne was overwhelming, so much larger and busier than Clearwater, with grand buildings and streets crowded with people from all walks of life. Hannah clutched her bag tightly and asked directions to the courthouse from a shopkeeper. Judge Wilson, she discovered, was a formidable figure in Cheyenne, respected by some, feared by others. His chambers were located in an imposing stone building that made Hannah feel small and provincial as she climbed the steps. "I need to see Judge Wilson," she told the clerk, a pinch-faced man who barely glanced up from his papers. "His Honor is presiding in court today," the clerk replied dismissively. "Return tomorrow. It's urgent," Hannah insisted. "It concerns Mitchell Wyatt." This caught the clerk's attention. He studied her more carefully. "And you are Hannah Benson from Clearwater. Wait here." The clerk disappeared through a heavy wooden door, returning minutes later with changed demeanor. "Follow me, Miss Benson." Hannah was led through a maze of corridors to a private office where a gray-haired man in judicial robes was reviewing documents. Judge Wilson was older than she'd expected, with piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate her thoroughly as she entered. "Miss Benson," he said, gesturing to a chair, "I understand you have information regarding Mitchell Wyatt." Hannah reached into her bodice and withdrew the sealed document. "He asked me to bring this to you if he was captured." The judge accepted it with raised eyebrows. "And he has been, I take it?" "Yes, sir. In Clearwater, they're saying he'll hang." Judge Wilson broke the seal and unfolded the papers, reading silently for several minutes while Hannah sat nervously. His expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes changed as he reached the final page. "You know what these papers contain, Miss Benson?" "No, sir." "Mitchell only said they would clear his name." Judge Wilson nodded slowly. "They may do more than that. They appear to document an extensive smuggling operation run by Edward Holbrook with the cooperation of several officials, including," he paused, "Sheriff Davis of Clearwater." Hannah's eyes widened. "The sheriff is involved. According to these records, he's been paid handsomely to look the other way and assist when needed." Judge Wilson tapped the papers thoughtfully. "Wyatt was gathering evidence against them. Then you believe him, that he's innocent." "These documents certainly suggest it," the judge agreed, "but they'll need to be verified and quickly given Wyatt's situation." Hope surged through Hannah. "What happens now?" "Now, Miss Benson, I send telegrams to the territorial governor and the federal marshal's office." Judge Wilson rose. "And you should find accommodations. I suspect we'll need your testimony." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of statements and telegrams. Hannah stayed at a modest boarding house, spending her days at the courthouse answering questions from increasingly serious-looking officials. By the third day, a contingent of federal marshals had been dispatched to Clearwater with orders from the governor himself. Hannah rode with them, despite Judge Wilson's concerns about her safety. She couldn't bear to remain behind, not knowing Mitchell's fate. The group arrived in Clearwater late in the evening, creating a stir as 6 armed marshals and Hannah dismounted in front of the sheriff's office. To her surprise, her father was among those who rushed out to see the commotion. "Hannah," he exclaimed, relief and confusion warring on his face. "What on earth? I'm sorry I left without proper explanation," she said quickly. But Mitchell was telling the truth. Before her father could respond, the lead marshal pushed past them and entered the sheriff's office. Moments later, shouts erupted from inside. What followed would be talked about in Clearwater for generations. Sheriff Davis was arrested on the spot. The marshals then proceeded to the Holbrook Ranch, where Edward Holbrook and 3 of his men were taken into custody. By dawn, Mitchell had been released from his cell, his name publicly cleared by official declaration. Hannah waited outside the jailhouse, her heart pounding as Mitchell emerged into the morning light, escorted by 2 marshals who were now treating him with respect rather than contempt. When he saw her, his weary face transformed into a smile that made the past 3 years of waiting seem insignificant. "You did it," he said simply as he reached her. "We did it," Hannah corrected. "I only delivered the evidence you gathered." Mitchell took her hands, oblivious to the growing crowd of curious onlookers. "You believed in me when no one else would. You waited when everyone said you were a fool." "I knew the man you were," Hannah said softly. "I never believed you could change so completely." Mitchell smiled ruefully. "I have changed, Hannah. I'm not the carefree boy who left. These years have hardened me in ways I'm not proud of." "We've both changed," Hannah acknowledged, "but some things remain constant." "Like what?" "Faith," Hannah said simply. "And love," Mitchell's eyes softened. "I don't deserve you." "Perhaps not," Hannah teased gently, "but you have me nonetheless." In the days that followed, the full extent of Holbrook's operation was revealed. Mitchell's family ranch, which had been seized after his flight, was returned to him with the government's apologies. The townspeople who had shunned him now sought to make amends, though Mitchell accepted their overtures with guarded politeness rather than enthusiasm. Only with Hannah did he lower his defenses completely, sharing the full story of his 3 years in exile, the fear, the loneliness, the determination to clear his name and return to her. "Did you ever doubt I'd wait?" Hannah asked one evening as they sat on the porch of his newly reclaimed ranch house. Mitchell considered the question seriously. "Not doubt exactly, but I feared life might give you no choice, that circumstances or time might make waiting impossible." "Many people tried to convince me it was impossible," Hannah admitted. "They called me stubborn, deluded, a fool," Mitchell added softly. "The biggest fool in Wyoming territory," Hannah agreed with a smile. "My father was certain of it." At the mention of her father, Mitchell's expression sobered. "He's coming around, I think. It can't be easy for him to admit he was wrong about me." It was true. Hannah's father had struggled to reconcile his judgment of Mitchell with the truth that had been revealed. But seeing his daughter's happiness had begun to soften his stance. "He asked when we're getting married," Hannah said casually. Mitchell turned to her, surprise evident in his face. "Did he now?" He suggested spring would be nice. Hannah continued, fighting a smile at Mitchell's expression. "Though I told him that seemed a rather long wait, all things considered." Mitchell chuckled, taking her hand. "Hannah Benson, are you proposing to me?" "I've done all the waiting in this relationship," she pointed out. "It seems only fair you should do the proposing." Mitchell slid from the porch swing to one knee before her, still holding her hand. The playfulness in his eyes gave way to something deeper, more profound. "I had planned something more elaborate," he admitted, "but perhaps simplicity is best after all we've been through." He took a deep breath. "Hannah Benson, you waited for me when wisdom said to move on. You believed in me when evidence suggested otherwise. You risked everything to save me when all seemed lost. I can't promise our life will be easy or perfect, but I can promise that every day I'll work to be worthy of the faith you placed in me. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Hannah's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Mitchell, yes." They were married 2 weeks later in Clearwater's small church, the same building outside which Hannah had refused Thomas Miller's proposal. The irony wasn't lost on her, nor was the presence of Thomas himself at the ceremony, having returned briefly from Denver to settle his affairs. "I wish you happiness, Hannah," he said politely during the celebration afterward. It seems your patience was rewarded after all. Thank you, Thomas, she replied sincerely. I hope Denver brings you everything you deserve. The newlyweds began rebuilding Mitchell's neglected ranch, working side by side to restore what had been lost. It was hard work, but satisfying, and each evening they collapsed into bed tired but content in the knowledge they were creating something that was truly theirs. 6 months after their wedding, as they sat watching the sunset from their porch, Mitchell turned to Hannah with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever regret it? He asked. The waiting, the uncertainty. Hannah considered the question, her hand resting on her stomach where their first child had just begun to make its presence known, a secret she planned to share with Mitchell that very evening. Not for a moment, she said truthfully. Some things are worth waiting for, no matter what the world may say. Mitchell smiled, pulling her closer. Your patience made you mine, he said softly, and I thank God for it every day. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson, Hannah rested her head on her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that some kinds of foolishness, the kind born of love and faith, were the wisest choices of all. I have something to tell you, she whispered, guiding his hand to her stomach. Mitchell's eyes widened in wonder as understanding dawned. Hannah, are you? She nodded, smiling through happy tears. Our family is growing. The joy that spread across his face was all the vindication Hannah had ever needed. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that every whisper behind her back, every pitying glance, every person who had called her a fool, none of it mattered. This life they were building together was worth everything. I love you, Hannah Wyatt, Mitchell whispered against her hair, and I love you, she replied, enough to wait forever if I had to. Thankfully, he said with a gentle smile, forever turned out to be just 3 years. As darkness settled over the prairie, bringing with it the first stars of evening, Hannah silently thanked the stubbornness that had sustained her through those long years of waiting. Some called it foolishness, but she knew better. It was faith in Mitchell, in herself, and in the power of a love worth waiting for.